In a previous video that I made, I discussed the bias of House of the Dragon and how the show intentionally skewed the narrative to be more in favor of Rhaenyra and the Black faction. The show does this by presenting Rhaenyra and the members of her faction as more likable than Aegon and the members of his. As a result, the audience roots for Rhaenyra and believes that her claim is more legitimate than Aegon's. The audience also then believes that the Black faction is far more suited to rule the realm than the Green faction. But this is not true, of course. Just because Rhaenyra and the Black faction are likable doesn't mean that they are capable of governing the Seven Kingdoms. The Green faction, though it is villainized throughout the story's narrative, is actually more competent and experienced at doing the job. The Greens are also the faction of law and order, as they are the only ones who are trying to maintain the status quo. Even in their support of Aegon's claim, the Greens use customs and laws to establish Aegon's legitimacy. Therefore, there are three reasons why the Green faction deserves to rule the Seven Kingdoms: legitimacy, competence, and dutifulness.
Aegon Targaryen sits the Iron Throne. He wears the Conqueror's crown, wields the Conqueror's sword, has the Conqueror's name. He was anointed by a Septon of the Faith before the eyes of thousands. Every symbol of legitimacy belongs to him. Stale oaths will not put you on the Iron Throne, Princess. The succession changed the day your father sired a son.
There are three major cultural groups in Westeros: the First Men, the Rhaenyra, and the Andals. Out of all three of these cultural groups, it is the Andals who dominate in Westerosi society, and it is their culture which is the most influential. Most of the lords of the realm are of Andal descent, and they derive their authority from Andal customs, in particular the custom of male primogeniture. This custom is the main reason for why these lords are lords, and so they retain their rights for as long as the custom remains relevant. This is the very same custom that Aegon's claim is based on, and that's why so many of the lords in the realm support Aegon's claim. They believe that Aegon's claim is more legitimate, and in the words of Varys,
"Power resides where men believe it resides."
Rhaenyra's claim, on the other hand, undermines this custom. By supporting her claim, these lords would bring their own rights into question, and that's primarily why so many of them view her claim as illegitimate, despite the fact that Viserys proclaimed her as his heir. A king's word is law, and the lords of the land are bound by those laws, but a king's laws can never be taken seriously if the king himself does not follow them. Viserys names Rhaenyra his heir and makes the realm swear fealty to her, but Viserys seemingly disregards his own proclamation by remarrying and reproducing. He even names his eldest child after the founding father of the Targaryen dynasty, Aegon. These actions all seem to contradict what Viserys says, and whenever Viserys provides clarity on his intentions, it's always directly to Rhaenyra herself in private with no witnesses.
I did waver. At one time. But I swear to you now, on your mother's memory, you will not be supplanted.
Therefore, in the eyes of the realm, Viserys' proclamation is insignificant, and the Andal custom prevails. Even more to the Greens' favor is the fact that the Targaryen dynasty itself is built on a foundation that has been solidified by this custom. This goes all the way back to Aegon I, and the fact that his rights prevailed over those of his sister, Visenya Targaryen. Aegon I was actually the second-born child, and Visenya was the first, but it was Aegon who inherited Dragonstone and all of its incomes, and it was Aegon himself who was crowned king. Interestingly, Visenya never protested her brother's rise, and even when Aegon I died in 37 AC, Visenya never pressed her own claim to the Iron Throne. Instead, Visenya rallied behind her son, Maegor, and helped him to take the Iron Throne and secure his hold on power. Even then, male primogeniture prevailed, and a male claimant's rights took precedent over those of a female claimant. This actually becomes a pattern throughout the Targaryen dynasty. Jaehaerys became king despite the claims of his older sister Rhaenyra. Balon and Aemond were heirs despite the claims of Saera, and Viserys became king despite the claims of Rhaenys and her son Laenor. Therefore, there is a historical precedent that establishes Aegon's claim and bolsters its legitimacy against the claims of Rhaenyra.
It wouldn't matter if she were Jaehaerys himself, born again. Rhaenyra is a woman.
Aegon is also surrounded by all of the symbols of legitimacy: the crown, the sword, and the throne of the conqueror. These symbols are important for psychological reasons because the people of Westeros are very superstitious. These people believe that if the throne ever cuts a person, they're not worthy, and that anyone who bears the sword of the conqueror should be the next in line to the throne. This is actually how the Blackfyre Rebellion starts later on in the story. So for Aegon to be surrounded by all of these important symbols reinforces the narrative that he is the legitimate heir, and the Greens can use this to establish their authority.
A wise king knows what he knows and what he doesn't.
I have no wish to rule, no taste for duty. I'm not suited.
You're young. A wise young king listens to his counselors and heeds their advice until he comes of age. And the wisest kings continue to listen to them long afterwards.
Aegon and Rhaenyra are both young and inexperienced, so in order to rule well, they would both need some help. That means that they would need skilled and experienced advisors to help them govern the realm, advisors who are competent and efficient at doing their jobs. The Green faction is the only faction that has those kind of advisors. All of the members of the Green faction have at least a decade of experience in governing the realm. We know this because the period of time between episodes 7 and 8 was 10 years, and during that time, Viserys wasn't able to make any decisions because he was too sick. So the Green Council was the only one who ruled the realm in his absence. Both in the book and on the show, there is no mention of misgovernance or incompetence from the Green Council during this time. All of them are competent in their respective positions, and they all do their jobs efficiently. A lot of this success can be accredited to Otto's leadership, because Otto was the one who probably led as the council's hand of the king. Otto Hightower is a brilliant politician and has served as hand of the king for 2 previous kings. What's interesting is that Viserys' reign is described as peaceful and prosperous, and yet Viserys himself is described as being too indecisive and weak. So clearly the successes of Viserys' reign can be attributed to Otto's guidance and decision-making. The Hand is the king's chief counselor, and throughout the show, we see how Viserys leans on Otto's advice. This makes him a more than suitable advisor for Aegon, as he is the most experienced politician in the realm.
Now go to him, be penitent. Plead the injury to your son. Keep a grip on your passions. And I promise you in time, you and I together will prevail.
Rhaenyra, on the other hand, doesn't really have politicians in her council that have the same level of experience. Daemon is her chief counselor and consort, and yet Daemon doesn't like council meetings or governance. He is incompetent in diplomacy and politicking, and most of Rhaenyra's other counselors are similar. The rest of her court is made up of children, and none of them have the experience to govern effectively. Her only competent advisors are the Valyrians, both Rhaenys and Corlys her closest allies. Yet still, Rhaenys has no experience in governing the realm, and Corlys is sick and wounded from battle. Rhaenyra also doesn't cultivate her relationship with the Valyrians, and she commits many actions that threaten to undermine it. She insults the Valyrians in various ways, like marrying their son but still mothering bastards. And she adds salt to these wounds by being responsible for his murder.
Rhaenyra was complicit. Rhaenyra's son's death. That girl destroys everything she touches.
These grievances could affect the way that they advise her in the future, because instead of trying to help her, they could instead try to sabotage her. After all, these people have no experience of working with one another. However, the Green Faction's members are used to working with one another, and they are all competent enough to work together efficiently. The Green Faction is therefore the only faction that deserves to rule the Seven Kingdoms.
I think one of the fundamental things is, in a good king, is someone who regards being king as a duty rather than a privilege that they are entitled to.
Or queen.
Throughout the whole of Season 1, the story makes a lot of comparisons between Rhaenyra and Alicent. These women are very important to the narrative of the story because in truth, they are the leaders of their respective factions. Rhaenyra is the leader of the Black faction, and though the Greens are in support of Aegon's claim, it's actually Alicent who organizes and leads this council. Therefore, both of these women have a lot of power over their respective factions and influence over the decisions that are made within them. Their attitudes towards law and order are therefore important. Rhaenyra has no regard for law and order.
When I'm queen, I will create a new order.
In a society such as Westeros, where ladies are expected to behave a certain way, Rhaenyra has rejected these roles and has always tried to do things in her own way. Now for us, the audience in modern society, Rhaenyra's actions are not problematic. Her behavior seems normal, like it's not a big deal, and the people around her are the ones who seem archaic. However, in a society like Westeros, where roles and laws are important, Rhaenyra's behavior is quite troubling. In this society, when noble ladies are expected to behave dutifully, Rhaenyra's actions seem selfish, reckless, and impulsive. She usually does and says things without thinking about the consequences of her actions, and this is a terrible trait for a ruler to have. She lacks the skills to politic effectively, and she doesn't know how to form strong political relationships. As I had said earlier, she does a lot of stupid things throughout the story that undermine her relationship with the Valyrians, a powerful house and an ally she needs to take the Iron Throne. Her lack of regard for the rules and expectations which are foisted upon her as a woman in this society actually make her a terrible choice to govern the realm. Alicent, on the other hand, is a better option. Her leadership style is more aligned with the expectations of the society because Alicent herself has always embraced the system's guidelines and expectations. Alicent has always been dutiful and obedient to the customs, and she's always been a strict observer of the laws of the land. We see that Alicent isn't always happy when she does this, and that it's actually isolated her and made her very lonely. And yet Alicent still does what's expected of her. Alicent still does her duty. To a modern audience who watches Alicent's character, of course we feel bad for her as she goes through this, but Alicent's temperament actually makes for a good ruler in Westerosi society.
Have you never imagined yourself on the Iron Throne?
Alicent always does her duty and follows the rules, regardless of how she feels and what she has to sacrifice. All of this is in service to everybody else, her husband, her family, the realm. She marries the king and she bears his children, therefore securing the line of succession and the security of the realm. Alicent is also a good consort for Viserys because she is courteous and diplomatic and able to form political alliances. These relationships ultimately benefit the Green faction, as these kinds of allies will be able to support Aegon's claim. So the fact that Alicent is so dutiful and lawful actually has an impact on the affairs of her council. The Greens are the faction of law and order, and they are more trustworthy when it comes to governing the realm. Most of the Green faction's members are dutiful and lawful. It is their sense of duty which drives them to want to support Aegon's cause in the first place. And that's because they believe that Aegon's cause is more legitimate than that of Rhaenyra. Aegon's cause is based on Andal and Valyrian customs, as well as historical precedent from Targaryen rule. His claim is also bolstered by the important symbols of his legitimacy, and this gives the Green faction a justification to assert their authority. This faction is also filled with more competent counselors who are far more experienced in governance than that of the Black faction. This means that the Green faction is more likely to rule soundly and more effectively than the Blacks, and this is why they are more credible when it comes to governance. Their dutifulness, competence, and legitimacy is what makes them the faction that is far more deserving to rule the Seven Kingdoms. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments section, and if you like this video, click the thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Peace.